make sure. Okay. Happy Friday. It's another Minopoly AMA, even though Minopoly's on pause. And I can't stress this enough to you guys that it is a pause. And if we look at the market, I'm going to kind of change things around here. I don't know if you guys can see my tab that I am sharing. I know that you'll be able to see it on the video, but I'll try to share it with you guys here. So let me go to present, and yeah, I'll just show Bitcoin. You know, it did a fake out. I don't I don't know how else I would explain this. I really thought that, you know, it did this beautiful kind of bull run up, and I thought, you know, it was going to do just a little bit of a dip and then, you know, continue to go on up. But it's looking to me, especially with this Black Swan event that we had, that there's a lot more correction in the market than I was kind of having a feeling for. And you can see right now, like even now we're going into a nosedive. And so what does this fundamentally mean for the Minopoly project, for the Cobra X project? You know, obviously the lower Bitcoin price action is the more Bitcoin that has to be sold to pay for power costs. And so it hits the profitability in that area. But I think what's kind of more significant to understand is, you know, are we going to get the unplug event? If we look, you know, historically, and let me just pull up like BTC difficulty chart. Yeah, I'm gonna leave this. Yeah, let's go to this chart here. It's not a very pretty chart. We'll go to the 3-year view. Actually, let's go to all. We can see that after every halvening event, we will get an all-time high or a raise in the difficulty. Wish I could zoom into this a little bit better for you guys, but then after that, we will get a dramatic drop, and you know we've seen this time and time again. What I'm not seeing that's good. It zoomed in when I hit my scroll wheel. Let's try to zoom in then a little bit better. What I've not seen yet, let me see if I can take this color off here. Yeah, let me just take the price action. Let's see, fill on and off. Maybe we can just change this to, we'll change this to white. So it can't be seen. I think that's the hex for white. Yeah, there we go, made it disappear. See, I still remember how to code. What we can see is, you know, after the halvening events, we'll get these dramatic drop-offs. And we even kind of had a little bit of it here. But we got an initial dip, and then we went to an all-time high, and we're just holding at that. And what I'm really looking for is these dramatic drops in the network hash rate. And this is, you know, the miners that have been holding out, you know, that have been, you know, making a deficit because their power cost, anything above 5.5 cents right now, for, you know, S19 models, or, you know, even, you know, the WhatsMiner M50s, because of their efficiency, it really is not making money. I mean, it's just either breaking even or it's actually going in the negative. And typically what we see is when it goes in the negative like that, we got a massive unplug event, and that is kind of the telltale signal that the bull run is coming. And then the bull run begins, and then we slowly see the network come back online, like we've seen in this event here. And hold on just a second, we've got another one here. I need to admit. Yeah, so, you know, like we've seen in you know, multiple historical instances, you know, we see this unplug event. I'm not seeing any indication of that. And, you know, it could be due to people getting extremely good power rates. But, you know, guys, I mean, we've got some of the cheapest power on the planet. I really don't know who would have a better power rate than us, unless they're doing some sort of, strange leveraging. And what I mean by that is you've got to understand on the grand scale, these big institutional level miners, they don't pay a power bill every month like we do. John Q. Public. John Q. Public, we use our power for the month, and then at the end of the month they give us a bill for how much power we used, and we pay that bill, and that's typically how you pay the power. But on an institutional level, they don't even do it that way. They will actually buy power in blocks. They will buy 6 months worth of power on the open market. And this is why they're able to sell that power back to the power company in the event, there was a natural disaster or something. Like, a few years back, Texas had this freak, ice storm that came in and shut down half the grid. And the institutional level miners, like those companies, made out like gangbusters, because instead of using those blocks of power that they'd already pre-purchased, they sold those blocks of power back to the power companies for like a massive profit. Like they made like 4 times what they would have made using that same power to mine Bitcoin. And so unless they've done something like that, where they've leveraged these blocks of power, these power futures that they've bought, and they've somehow made a profit off of it, I don't know how they're really running right now. The math is not adding up to me. And I even pointed this out to Rope earlier this week. Like, mathematically, I don't see how it's sustainable. So this means that sooner or later, we're going to have an unplug event. I can clearly tell just by how the network hash has risen. So if we look at the previous cycles, you can see that it's kind of moving at this angle. But, if we look at this cycle, we can see it's going at a much steeper angle. And that is not your ma and pa mining operations. That is, institutional money, big corporations making it grow at that, fantastic rate. And we can see, in previous iterations, we had, more ma and pa type operations. And I think those are, I don't want to say gone, but I think all of the weak ones have died and withered out. The sad thing is, I still have a lot of friends from the kind of ma and pa level. And what I mean by ma and pa is like literally, these guys were mining on their farm or something, like they had a big acreage of land and they could get a megawatt transformer to it. And so they were just using that to mine with. And in the early days, electricity cost was always an important concern, but it wasn't as much of a concern because you were making oodles and oodles of Bitcoin. A gentleman, I won't mention his full name, but his first name is Brian. He was literally mining since 2013, and he was telling me, I used to make 100 Bitcoin every day with his mining farm. Every single day, he would get 100 Bitcoin. And he got out in the last cycle, and what happened to him was somebody broke into the AT&T phone network and cloned his phone, got into his phone and cracked into his wallet and stole all of his Bitcoin, thousands and thousands of Bitcoin out of his wallet. And then the other survivors were the people that got into it really early, and these guys are just fanatics. They're Bitcoin maximalists, and they have more Bitcoin than they know what to do with, and therefore they have more money than they know what to do with. But the thing about these people is, your everyday person in the early days of Bitcoin, they all just kind of, shook their head and waved their hand. The people that got into it in the early days that really have a lot of Bitcoin now, those people kind of had a couple screws loose upstairs, if you know what I'm saying. I'm trying to be polite about it as possible, but they definitely didn't think and behave like normal people do. And it's just that one of those 1 in a million things where, they saw something, they saw an opportunity, they jumped on it, and they actually lucked out, and it paid off for them. But the problem is it doesn't fit the underlying issues with this person, and, the way they think. They tend to be very arrogant and dismissive is another word I would say. that they are, because you know, anybody can get lucky. You know, if you can, I guess the best way I can put it is this. My childhood was very difficult, and I struggled and worked really hard. And by the time I was 25, that was when I became a multimillionaire for the first time in my life. And just about after that time, kind of, you know, the peak or the crescendo, my wife at the time, she was Japanese, and we were trying to get her an American green card. But because of a clerical error, I guess is the best word to use, in our green card application, she was denied the green card. And this was after 5 years of me fighting it and going in front of a federal INS judge with my brand new born daughter, telling the judge, you know, I can't raise this child and run my company all by myself. I need my wife here. She's never broken a single law. She's never hurt a fly. Like, there's no reason to kick her out. But they kicked her out anyway. So I had to sell my interest in the company and sell everything, sell my house, my cars. You know, I had everything you guys could ever want and dream of it for a 25-year-old, and pack 8 years of my life into 2 suitcases, moved to Japan. And obviously my wife and daughter, they went to Japan first, ahead of me, because, you know, she was an infant. She was just a newborn child, and, you know, she needed her mother. And I had to stay behind and sell everything. And I remember my last day in my house. I was sitting in my hot tub. I was watching the sun go down, and I was just thinking to myself, why? You know, why? Why would life be so hard and so much of a struggle for me? And, you know, I would put in the effort, and I would finally get ahead, and I would make my dreams come true, and I would reach this goal of becoming a millionaire, and then have, you know, like all this, you know, have to lose it all, have to, you know, sell it all and give it all away. And I had an epiphany in that hot tub. And the epiphany that I had was, anybody can do it once. If you do it once, you'll never know if it was really you or if you were just lucky. But if you can do it again and again and again, over and over and over again, then you know it's really you. It's something that you can really do, that you really achieved. And that just kind of washed over me. And when I arrived in Japan, shortly after I arrived in Japan, 9/11 happened. I don't know if you guys know much about that, but it was when the airplanes crashed into the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers. And as I was watching this on live TV in Japan unfold, I panicked. And I called my broker in New York, and I said, sell it all, because I thought World War III was coming for real, guys. I thought the U.S. was going to release nukes, like, within, you know, hours. So I was like, sell it all, liquidate it, you know, wire it to my accounts in Japan. And, you know, at the end of the day, when, you know, because the stock markets were crashing when that was happening too, because, you know, the stock people were also feeling the same as me, like, is World War III about to happen? And they were all trying to get out of the market. So I ended up only having like 100K. You know, I had like 1.8 million that I invested, and when I liquidated out, I only had like 100K. And so I literally had to start all over again in Japan. And I went from literally nothing in Japan, like not even be able to speak the language, to my highest grossing and sale company that I've built to date. And when I left Japan, I liquidated that company and took the millions and millions and put it in a trust fund for my daughter. So I've proven to myself that I'm capable of succeeding, not just one time, but multiple times. But unfortunately, there are people in this world that, you know, again, they succeeded without really being able to have the skill sets and the abilities to actually succeed. It was just literally they were in the right place at the right time, and they had the dumb luck. And those people are still, unfortunately, continuing to stay in the game. But for the most part, it's the institutional level that is driving this, that is driving what's going on here. And the only good news I can say about the institutional level is that I know for a fact they're going to hold on to the market, and they're going to have diamond hands. And this is going to eventually lead to the rise of Bitcoin to astronomical numbers, like, the 650, the 680K region that I've been predicting for quite some time. It's not going to be the everyday person that drives these prices. It's going to be these institutionals that are holding on very strong, and that are very strong and resilient to Bitcoin price fluctuation and Bitcoin price changes. So hang tight, guys. It's going to be a bumpy ride. This is going to be one of the more difficult post-halvening mining situations I've experienced. That's what I'm seeing, because I'm not seeing that great dip in network difficulty. I'm not seeing any indication of that. As a matter of fact, in my channels, what I'm seeing is institutional level clients are doubling down. They're not even trying to sell their older machines, because they know eventually, when the price of Bitcoin goes high enough, that they can plug those machines in, which is interesting. That's another thing that's very different. So typically what we saw in previous markets is we would see this massive liquidation event where everybody would try to dump or get rid of their machines because they weren't profitable anymore, so they would try to cut bait. And I'm not even seeing that. The only thing that I'm seeing being posted consistently now in my channels are actually hosting sites. So all of these hosting sites that didn't have favorable power rates, that had 5 cent, 6 cent power, 7 cent even, they're all trying to get out of it, because unless they have like really, really expensive state-of-the-art gear, they've got nothing that they can mine with at that power cost. All right, Cameron's asking, yeah, what's the extreme fear? What's with the extreme fear today and yesterday? Difficult. I'm glad I can get more for less. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. It's an election year. Election years are always dicey. On top of just some other things that, when you pump money into an economy, it has a short-term benefit, but a long-term drag, and it takes a long time. It takes a long time to recover from that. And I was listening to like a politician from way back in the day, from like the 1960s or something like that, and he said recovering from inflation is like alcoholism. It's like at first, it's all great. You dump money into the system, you drink a bunch of alcohol, and you feel really great. But he said, after that, when you cut it off and you've got the hangover the next day, that hangover drags on and on and on all day, and you realize that, the fun time you had before wasn't really that fun. And it's pretty much the same thing that I'm sensing we're going through. So I actually see this as a good sign. It shows us that the printing money party is over, and the economy is going to contract and become more resilient. Inflation is going to contract and become more resilient, and hopefully that will be the footing or the foundation that drives up the market or the price. Spam for Stam said, is the M50 profitable today at 2 cent power? Well, what's really important for you guys to understand about the M50s is the M50s promised a power consumption. All right, they're advertised, their factory power consumption should be 28 watts a terahash, and that's what we were using to figure out everything. I'm going to go ahead and I'll take us to A6Z here. But their true power usage, what they actually use, is very, very different. Refresh this here. They're actually using closer to, let's take hosting profit. We'll go ahead and factor in the halving. Let's make profit share 100. They're actually using closer to like 35 watts a terahash. And so let's go ahead and get this down to, I think we had, 60 units? And let's get the watts per terahash, say 36. All right. So at 60 units, we'd be generating, roughly. Here, let me get the power rate to 2 cents here. We'd be generating roughly about 8,000 in Bitcoin generated, which is far less than what Cobra is generating. Let me go ahead and check Cobra here real quick. You guys won't be able to see it, but I can read it off to you real quick here. Cobra is going to generate roughly about 13,600, right? So that's a significant difference, right? And it's using roughly the same amount of machines. Roughly the same amount of machines. So let's see. Okay. But if we look at this, right? So we're going to generate roughly 8,800 worth of Bitcoin. And then we factor in our power cost. So that leaves us with a remainder of 4,834. Right, so take 4,834 times 0.7, and that leaves you guys with 3,381 worth of Bitcoin, and then that's got to be divided up by what, 620, and that comes to $5.45 a month, right? Which is, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it to put the stress and the damage on the machines for $5.45 a month. It's not fair to you guys. And it's not fair to the project, because all it's going to do is it's going to create more headaches and more problems down the road. So is it profitable? Yeah, it's profitable if you're 100% just mining for yourself. But in a project like MIneopoly, where we've got to split things up, and it's got to make financial sense for me to run operations, it's not making enough money for it to make sense. It makes more sense to put more efficient machines that are making. Spam for Stam is asking, if there was no Cobra X, would the miners still be online? That's a really good question. I'm going to be brutally honest with you. I would have been telling all of you guys to, let's unplug. Just because I know it's not worth it. At least, let me put it this way. If we had done a full ROI on the machines, then I'd say burn them to the ground. Let God sort them out. Let's burn them to the ground. But the problem is we haven't gotten our money out of the machines yet. And my professional advice is, if you have not gotten your money out of the machines and it's not profitable to run them, don't run them. Don't burn in more problems or create more issues with them. Try to squeeze as much life out of them to get that ROI. Focus on the ROI. Don't focus on the running, focus on the ROI. So yeah, to be brutally honest with you guys, I would have told you guys to, let's unplug. Let's at least unplug for 30 to 60 days and see where the market goes, before we plug in, because it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense. Did that answer your question? Spam for Elvis or spam for Stan? Well, we would leave the miners on the racks. I wouldn't bother taking them off the racks. But yes, definitely unplug for 30, 60 days, or utilize the downtime to do a deep cleaning or something like that, something productive. But don't you have to make rent on the facility? Well, the way I pay for these facilities, or at least the way I pay for the rent, is I pay for it a year in advance. So technically I have to make rent, but at the same time, I'm not really making rent if I'm only making, like $1,000 a month. I'm not really, either way, I wouldn't be making the rent. So, and that's why I would advise to unplug and not run, and use this, as an opportunity to clean the miners or refresh the miners or something along those lines, because it just wasn't getting profitable, and it's not worth putting the wear and tear on everything. It's not worth putting the wear and tear on the big fans. It's not worth, putting the wear and tear on the electrical. It's just not worth it. Well, it's fortunate in a way that we're able to put Cobra in the place of um, what's going on with Monopoly. But it was not intentional. It wasn't a situation where I was just like, hey, let's do this. The Cobra X project, I've already paid a year worth of rent on the land. I'm good friends with the landowner. I'm going to have to kind of go to him and say, look, I paid everything in good faith. I tried to upgrade the power in good faith. Can you just give me a year on credit or something because I wasn't able to get power? So, you know, that's a completely different situation. But, it's just happenstance. It's coincidence. It's luck that the market dipped and it makes more sense to fill the racks with the Cobra equipment. Now, if Cobra didn't exist or if no other opportunity exists, I would still wholeheartedly recommend that at least we unplug, at the very least to just refresh and get everything clean and ready to go to where when it is profitable, we can put that wear and tear on it again. But I wouldn't recommend to just burn through it. And I definitely wouldn't recommend to take the M50s off the shelf. I would just leave them as is. And like I said, just go through, every day, take 5 or 6 off the shelf, tear them all completely apart, do a clean down, check the fans. If the fans need to be replaced, replace the fans, stuff like that. Why do you say that? Spam for Elvis, you're saying, but the reality is, with the existence of Cobra X, the M50s will never be turned back on. The space is taken. Why do you say that? Well, this is true, but the plot next door, I've been waiting on a power upgrade for more than half a year. Eventually, that's going to happen. And when that happens, most likely I probably realistically won't move just because it doesn't make sense. But when we build the new facility right next door, when we build the new mining structure and everything, there's nothing to stop me from putting the Monopoly miners in that structure. Yeah, I mean, you guys have to understand, I've paid an electrical engineering company and they've been working on this for 6 months to get the power upgrade to the land. That work has not stopped. It's so, just because it doesn't make sense for Monopoly to run where it previously was, doesn't mean I've stopped all my efforts for the Cobra X project or for that power upgrade. So, what am I going to do when the land that I've already paid the rent for and I've already paid for the power upgrade for, when that finally gets the power upgrade, what else would I do with it? Would I let it sit empty? No. So yeah, I mean, again, the we'll just say Site 1 is currently filled with Cobra X miners because it makes more business sense to operate with those. Site 2, as soon as it comes online, again, like I said, just because I'm lazy, it doesn't make sense for me to physically remove every single miner. I would just simply put the M50s into the new site and operate them. Again, as I've said, if it makes business sense, right? So if Bitcoin is still going, like we might have to shut down Cobra X, guys. If Bitcoin dips down to 30K, even Cobra X is going to be struggling to make a profit for you guys, right? So if it doesn't make sense to run, it doesn't make sense to run. It doesn't matter whether it's Cobra X or Monopoly, but if it makes sense, if it makes common sense and good business to run, of course. Of course the M50s will be in sight too. And not only that, but I'm talking with a gentleman who has 7 farms. I don't know what that is yet. That's off in the future, but typically we look for at least 2x to 4x of what we initially paid. And I think we paid around like $1,800 a unit or something like that. So, our goal would be something around like maybe, I don't know, $5,000 or $6,000 a unit at the peak of the bull run. Yeah, so if it makes sense to run Spam for Elvis, we are going to run, buddy. Believe you me, I'm not going to hold anything back. If it makes business sense and good sense to run, we will run. Right now, with Bitcoin difficulty and Bitcoin price action, it's not making sense. Right? But when it does make sense, we will plug back in. We will turn back on, guys. You know, there's why would I stop? Like you know, where you guys, you think I'm gonna spend a year of my life trying to get a power upgrade and finally get it and say, oh no, you guys can't use it? Like no, that's the whole point of what I've been doing with my time and my efforts. So yeah, I mean, you guys need to understand this. It's not like I'm just throwing you guys under the bus, and you know, we're making a calculated business decision. You know, and even you can agree, Spam for Elvis, that it makes more sense to use the power for a more profitable project, at least until the numbers make more sense with the market of Bitcoin, to where we're not burning through 50% of our revenue just paying for power. Right? That doesn't make sense to me. If we're utilizing, you know, okay, let's go back and look at the other numbers, right? So we've got 66 units running, and they're not what's miners. We'll do the S19. I found some S19 like hydros that were, no, that's not it. We had some 132 that were really close. There was maybe it was like an XP. Let's see, maybe the 138s. Okay, I'll go ahead and change this. Realistically, we're getting about 26 watts a terahash, and we'll make this 66 units. And realistically, we're getting about 35 watts a terahash. So we're pretty close. Actually, we're doing a little bit better than that. So you know, we look at Roop's project here. Yeah, see. That's not, let's see, because it's saying 1.94, and it's saying here 1.82. Okay, I guess it refreshed. Okay, so I guess it's caught up with the market now. But yeah, I mean, you can see there's a substantial difference here. You know, it's a third versus a half of what's mined. And that just makes more sense. I mean, it's more. Okay, if we agree on 100,000 BTC, that's the problem. Is network difficulty is not low. Network difficulty is at an all-time high, as I was showing previously. Like, it's not going lower; it's going higher. And so, to counter that, we need to have more efficient machines. And, you know, that might be something that, you know, I'm in the talks about with Roop. You know, there's a couple ways that we can look at this, because we're still at a good entry point in the market because the profitability is so terrible right now, to possibly liquidate the M50s and maybe refresh the entire project into some more efficient machines. Now, that would require a capital raise from you guys, because obviously we're not going to get, oh dear. Let me, sorry about that, guys. I don't know what button I hit, but it just kicked me out of the meeting. But that would require a capital raise to get newer gear, but hopefully it would be a minimum capital raise, because...
You're muted.
Am I muted? Yeah, okay, let me... There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, you guys can hear me now. Yeah, so just to reiterate, it may be a situation where, you know, we decide to liquidate what we have and then use that residual plus some extra to get the latest generation gear because it's so cheap, or we may just, you know, decide it's better to keep what we have and to keep grinding it, you know, when Bitcoin price is much higher and we don't have to spend so much on our operational electricity costs. You know, like I said, half of your mining just goes to the electricity, and that's at the cheapest electricity cost that's out there, guys. Nobody is running at 2 cents. If we look at the big dogs, they're maybe running at 3.5 cents. So they're spending more than half. They're making the same $10,000 a month, but they're spending 6,000 of it, on electricity. And yeah, I mean, and that's with fairly new efficient machines. Like if we take in the old S19s, yeah, I mean, look at that. Their residual, that's like 75, more than 75% of the money that they're generating is just eaten in their power costs, and that's not sustainable. A lot of these operations, they're running hosting services, and I know for a fact, the cheapest you can get in these hosting services is about 5.5 cents, and those guys are negative. I mean, you cannot run an S19 at today's difficulty and today's price. It doesn't make any profits. So, yeah, I mean, something's got to give is what I'm saying. And when that breaks, when it breaks through the dam and it gives, that's when we will make our next strategic move. That's what I was saying, Spam for Elvis, is I'm going to kind of put that to a vote. I'm rolling around with, yeah, we're not going to get, a huge return for the M50s by liquidating now, but yes, we can get into, S21 hydros or something like that pretty cheap. I mean, I think the current market for them, let me go right now. I'll go back to my buy gear chain page here. I mean, $7.20 for a terahash, for a hydro machine that's 27.5 watts per terahash. Let's go to the more efficient stuff. I mean, the new S21 Pros, those are $19.50. I mean, it's more expensive than what we paid a terahash for our machines, but with the efficiency, I mean, 16 watts a terahash, that's almost like twice as efficient as the S19K Pro. So I definitely know we're going to be in a good position to sell when the market bulls again. But yeah, I mean, that's something that we definitely need to discuss. Should we get out from under the M50s and get into some fresh gear, specifically like some hydro gear, because I know that's where the market's going in the future. Everything's going to be hydro. Or should we try to hold on what we've got, burn it through the bull run, and then try to get rid of it? That's a really good question, and it's something that I think you guys as a community, I think you guys as a community, you guys are going to have to come up with that answer, because for the first 2 years, I'm not allowed to make that decision. I'm only allowed to advise. I will say that looking at the trend and looking at the institutional versus the mom and pa, we look at the mom and pa growth and we look at the institutional growth. The only way we're going to stay ahead of the curve or with the curve of institutional is to do the same thing that they're doing. And I know they're all going hydro. So that's the smart play that I would recommend. But yeah, as Cameron mentioned, rip the Band-Aid off and get the better ones, because it's gonna put you in a better position in the future. Let me put it that way. It's gonna put you in a better position in the future. But before we do that, guys, and again, I've got to get the power first. So let me get the power first, or at least some sort of confirmation that the power is going to happen, in the next 20 days or 30 days or whatever. That's the problem. Is I've been waiting 6 months, Spam for Elvis, to find out when the power is going to get upgraded. And as soon as I have some certainty and some solidarity with that, that's when I will put the serious decision on the table for you guys to make. Should we put these M50s with the power, or should we upgrade to much more efficient gear? I was really, I can't complain about the What's Miners. There's some things that I really liked about them. The things that I really like about them is that they're simply constructed. They only have one fan in the front, one fan in the rear. If one fan goes out, they still run. In comparison with the S19s, they have 2 fans in the front, 2 fans in the back. If one fan goes off, the whole machine's dead. The M50s were very robust and kind of tank-like. One of the things that I didn't like about them, though, is that they would take an hour to an hour and a half to tune to their maximum hash rate. So you would waste, and if you gave a reboot, it would waste an entire hour retuning, trying to get to that max hash rate. Another thing that I dislike about the WhatsMiner machines is they used significantly way more power than what they were rated to use. They were promised at 28 watts a terahash, and in reality, real world math, they were doing 35, which is worse than S19, like the old S19s that are 34 and a half, right? So I don't like how we were misled about that. Hydro is less maintenance. That's another thing too. So with these air-cooled farms, I mean, we have to experience downtime sometimes because we get a failed pump. We have to, replace that pump. I recently got the utility company to supply utility water to the MIneopoly site because the bore well water we were using was so brackish. And even though I bought this very expensive reverse osmosis filtration system, it still did not get rid of the salt. It still clogged up the cooling curtains, and it was just making a hot mess. But we're now running, water from the utility company, and it is so much cleaner. It's so much, everything is running really, really tip top in the Cobra X project, because all of the, I don't know, I don't want to say mistakes, but all of the problems that were plaguing MIneopoly, or MIneopoly was plagued with, I've managed to resolve that in that interim when we did the swap out, and it's running like a top. And hydro is even less maintenance than air, because we don't have to worry about pumps, we don't have to worry about water supplies for the most part. I mean, I'll still use the utility water supply, but we won't have to use as much of it daily as we use with the Cobra X project. And yeah, it's just easier on the gear, easier all around, because there's just less pieces that can go wrong and less pieces that can fail. And one of the biggest problems, and I've said this so many times, it is not the heat in the UAE. The heat has never ever stopped us from mining. What stops us from mining is humidity, right? When it's 100% humidity, there's nothing to evaporate from those cooling curtains. The water just falls straight from the top to the bottom. It doesn't evaporate. And without that evaporation, there is no cooling. And without any cooling, we got to shut things off. But we've had days where it was 48 degrees outside, and I can show you it's 26 degrees inside the mining area. And it's because there was no humidity in the air, and we were getting all that wonderful evaporation. And it was cooling the miners just great. So hydro is going to have way less of those kinds of issues, because it's more robust of a system. Instead of just relying on a single plane of cooling, the hydro systems are usually 360-degree the cooling towers. And they're also quieter too, which means a quiet system means that if the agricultural department comes and does like a quick check of the land, they're not going to hear any mining. If they don't hear any mining, they're going to assume there's not any mining, and they're going to go on their merry way. So there's another added benefit of being overlooked by any possible fines or fees or anything like that. All right, guys. Yeah, it's getting towards the end of our AMA. Some good questions today. I'm glad that you had some good questions. I know some of you have some fears, or I guess anxiety, that once unplugged, or once machines are unplugged, they're never going to come back to life again. That is totally not what's going on. It just doesn't make good business sense to run them at the moment. And obviously, if I've got that extra power and it's just sitting there doing nothing, I'm going to talk to you guys and I'm going to say, hey, what we intended originally for Cobra X is fully operational online. Do you guys want to plug the machines in again and run, even if we're just grinding them into the ground? And again, you guys are still in the first 2 years of that decision-making process, so it's not going to be my decision to make, right? It's going to be your decision to make, but that's all still in the works. Like I said, I prepaid for a year's worth of rent to that land, so I've got to do something with it. Indeed, fear is a life destroyer. You know, all the things that you want in this life are on the other side of fear. That's something that I truly believe in. Don't let fear control you. Don't let fear run you. Don't let fear operate you. And we're not stopping out of fear, okay? We're stopping out of good business sense, right? Which is going to be, which is going to give us the greater future benefit, right? And that is running the Cobra X machines now, utilizing this downtime to either fix up, sell, refresh, whatever we're going to do with the M50s. It's going to be a community decision. It's not going to be my decision. But the smart thing to do is, like you said, Span for Elvis, is if you're having a factory, have it run the most, profitable product or the most productive product that it can at any given moment. And that's what we're doing. We're doing business smart things. We're not doing out of fear. It's not because we had to. It's not because we must do. It's because this is what makes more sense. This is, more practical. Yeah, that's right. Never give up and never surrender. Yeah, that's a great movie, Galaxy Quest, if you guys haven't seen that. Like I said, some really good questions, really good comments tonight. Hopefully I answered everything to your satisfaction. Spam for Elvis, if you've got another question or anything, I'll let you slip it in. If not, hang tight, guys. Like one thing that I love about this business is that you never see anything. Okay, what is this? Is this like some sort of password or something? Okay. All right. Thanks for your questions. No, they're great questions. And we'll see you guys next month. And let's just see what the market does. When it makes sense, it makes sense. And we'll make the proposition again. But I hope you guys have a great Friday and a great weekend. And I'll see you guys next month, I guess.